Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Thursday, April 23rd, and this week, drivers are suing Uber, Airbnb picks up passengers, and Waymo goes on a standstill. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Brian, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Jared. Great to be back. Doing it a day early. Let's get going. I love it.
Let's get going. Yeah, interesting topics today. We're going to jump right into it. Uh, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this first one, especially drivers are suing Uber over deactivations. And this is from Cal Matters, and they reported, quote, Uber has failed to create an appeal system to give drivers due process when they're kicked off the app, violating the California law it carved out that declared app-based drivers independent contractors. Many deactivated drivers report that they struggle to appeal their cases. They say they are initially sent to sites where they appear to be talking to bots, and rarely do they reach people who are empowered to actually help them. This group says that basically, due to Prop 22, it's not delivering on all of its promises. So, Brian, I would love to hear your thoughts on this legally. It sounds like they have some merit here on this in California.
Yeah, so when Prop 22 passed, one of the things that they promised was that there was going to be an appeals process for drivers who have been deactivated. And it was extremely hard fought. That was something that drivers wanted. It was something that was very necessary, given that when a driver's deactivated, it just uproots their life entirely. And when it was passed, that was one of the things about Prop 22 that drivers were actually excited about. And, in a lot of ways, that law didn't help drivers. This was one way that it seemed to. Um, Unfortunately, we're seeing that Uber is not playing by the rules, or at least that's what the organization is alleging, leaving drivers high and dry. So if that is the case, if they're not abiding by the law, they're going to have to, make amends for that. There's going to be damages that need to be paid, perhaps drivers that are reactivated, back pay. So this could be a big problem for Uber financially. Um, I think that, just from a driver perspective on what drivers need, this sort of protection is so necessary. This due process, this ability to fight back on a unfair deactivation, or frankly any deactivation, whether a driver is validly or invalidly deactivated, they deserve a chance to present their case. And that's what Prop 22 seemingly allowed for. That's what Uber seemingly is not providing. And I really hope that these cases go forward and are successful in securing this right for drivers that they so very clearly need.
Yeah, I agree. And, this just developed, so we're going to see more about this. And I'm very curious to see how this turns out. We're going to jump to the second story, which is really interesting. And I honestly didn't see this one coming. Airbnb is adding car pickups. And this is from Bloomberg. And they reported, quote, Airbnb is offering private car pickups in major markets outside the U.S., which is its latest move in an ambitious plan to offer hotel-like services in addition to lodging. It is partnering with a UK-based airport transfer company called Welcome Pickups to offer the service to guests traveling to 125 cities across Asia, Europe, Latin America, and so forth. Ride prices will be fixed and determined by Welcome Pickups based on the vehicle type needed to accommodate passengers and bags. And this is according to Welcome Pickups CEO. Users will receive their driver's contact info ahead of time in case they need to get in touch for questions. This is an interesting foray into Airbnb, sort of in the rideshare space. Now, this is not in the US, but I'd be very curious to see if this ends up in the US and what that means for rideshare.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting story, not just because it's giving Airbnb, guests the opportunity to have somebody pick them up at the airport. I think there's something bigger going on here. We're seeing Airbnb partner with different app-based providers. We've seen this already with Instacart. Airbnb has made it easier for guests at their residences to order groceries, for instance. And by having this collaboration of app-based groups within one single app, I think is really showing how far the app community has come. I think it's really smart for them to use each other to push business to one another, and it's an opportunity for all of these companies to grow. You can imagine in the United States if Uber and Airbnb were to partner up, and just through the Airbnb app, you'd be able to request your ride from the airport and get to your residence, and then all of a sudden the fridge was stocked with the groceries that you ordered for Instacart. It becomes a one-stop shop. It becomes seamless for the user. It's a way where all these companies can generate income, and all of these different app workers will be able to have their hand in all these different app companies. So I just think it's really interesting what we're seeing, and it's Airbnb really being on the forefront of trying to make, be the center of this hub in a lot of ways. Not having to control everything themselves, but bringing on other contractors to make the experience better for its users, to offer more options. And hopefully it's good for both customers of the app, workers of the app, and I would imagine Airbnb is going to be making more money as well. So it seems like it could really just be a win for everybody.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't, that they didn't lean on Uber for this, but they're definitely taking it out of Uber playbook, just like you said, as far as make it all integrated, one-stop shop. And Uber's been talking about that. They've obviously Uber touts themselves as a technology company, not a transportation company. And now Airbnb is saying, hey, we're going to do more than just, allow you to book, rooms or houses or hotels. Yeah, I'm very curious to see how this develops. I think they're testing in other markets, and then who knows? I mean, the way things are moving so quick, maybe it becomes a Waymo Airbnb combo, where it's autonomous vehicle picks you up at the airport, takes you to the Airbnb. I don't know, but I do think this is interesting, and you made a good point there. The market is growing, it's maturing, and now they're starting to learn how to integrate stuff into more than just point A to point B. It's really now what are all the ways that we can pretty much capitalize on a person the moment we can get them. And that's really what they're doing here.
Well, and I just one more thing here. I
Yeah.
think that international travelers, it makes a ton of sense. Like my family was in Paris not too long ago, and we had a cab driver who didn't speak any English at all, and we don't speak French, and it made the transportation from the airport very difficult. And frankly, I thought that we got overcharged. We got driven around a little bit when that was happening. I don't think that I'm the first person to think that, that may have happened in a situation with a driver where I'm the foreigner, and I don't know my way around. To integrate transportation to and from an airport in a place where you're not familiar with, where you don't speak the language, it makes things far less complicated. It takes out some of the guesswork in terms of, are you being driven around, or are you getting point A to point B? You know how much it's going to cost and how much it should cost. So I just think that this could really be of benefit to international travelers who might feel out of place in the transportation sector, in the time between the airport and their place of residence during their stay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, it does make sense actually when you put it that way. So that's probably why they're doing it, and it makes perfect sense to me. The final story today is just for you, Bryant. You bring this up all the time about Waymo not being ready. Well, it looks like it really isn't, and this time Waymo has brought traffic to a standstill. And this is from the street, and they reported, quote, last December, the autonomous ride-hailing company Waymo was forced to temporarily suspend service in San Francisco for one day after a blackout left the robotic vehicles dead and unable to navigate the city. I believe we talked about this. There's a ton of footage on it. This happened last year. At the time, Waymo told the street that the vehicles can navigate intersections where the traffic signal is operable. Obviously, despite videos showing the opposite, we saw those. However, they said this was fixed. But over the weekend, a new video emerged of the autonomous vehicles struggling with a similar situation. This time it was in Atlanta, Georgia. So over the weekend, a video from Atlanta went viral showing a group of three Waymos completely blocking traffic in one direction of the street. Each stopped at a white line with a broken traffic light flashing red. The video shows drivers stuck behind cars as people exit their vehicles and walk around the intersection filming the chaos. So, Brian, It looks like Waymo said we fixed this. It's not going to happen again, and obviously it happened again.
Here we are.
There we are.
Deja vu all over again. This is not shocking to me. We've seen these vehicles and the technology fail time and time again. I've said it once, I'll say it again. I think that this is the future. I think we're all going to be in autonomous vehicles at some point in the future. However, we're just not there yet. The technology is failing. It's causing issues for passengers. It's causing issues for communities. The fact that the streets are blocked, like, yeah, it's funny. You can take a video of it and post it online, but that could have caused a real problem. If an ambulance needed to get through, if there was an emergency, even just a traffic jam, even if you just had some place to go and you couldn't get through the intersection because of these vehicles, that creates an issue for our community. And the vehicles need to be better. The technology needs to be better. As governments and local officials allow these cars to go on the city streets, they need to demand better. They need to demand accountability. And I hope in the cities that we live in, I hope that for the sake of the rest of the country, that politicians step up and take control and put ordinances and laws in place that hold companies accountable, demand that certain technology is ready, and have repercussions if it's not. So it's a matter of time before something very serious happens. I'm hopeful it doesn't, but it just seems like we're on that path because the technology is being deployed before it's quote unquote perfect, like they say it is.
Yeah, and you bring up a very good point. It's kind of funny now, and there's videos of it. It could have been a very serious issue. I think the other thing that's going to be very interesting about all of this tech, which we aren't going to see yet, is depreciation. Technology depreciates over time, just from wear and tear, the weather. Obviously, Waymos are looking to come to Chicago, and they're going to be in other cold cities, and so it's going to get beat up, and it's going to be I'm very curious to see what happens with these Waymos then. If they're having issues already out of the gate where they're sort of struggling and they're stopping and the navigation isn't working, well, what happens in 2 years from now when these cars, when some of them aren't serviced or their sensors don't work as well? Are we going to start to see catastrophic events? I hope not, but it's just too early to tell any of this stuff. And I'm sure in a year from now we'll be talking again about this and saying, remember a year ago? So it's just very interesting to me. And you're right about, the tech isn't ready. They're kind of forcing on the streets. I just hope nothing bad happens, honestly.
Yeah, well, just to your point, remember a year ago? Well, a year ago, we were having the same conversation. So
Yeah.
you would think that the technology itself would be getting better, that they would be updating the features, that they would be learning from their past mistakes. But if we're still having the same issues, it's it's like the companies either aren't learning or the technology just isn't ready. Maybe both. But if a year from now we're having the same conversation, I don't understand what we're doing here because the technology is supposed to improve city by city. They're not supposed to be deploying the same vehicles with the same issues and the same bugs. They're supposed to be learning, and it just doesn't seem like that's happening.
Yeah, and I think that is the issue, and I think at some point we're going to uncover it. Likely probably Bloomberg. They do a good job at that. Where something's going to come out, and it's going to tell us either the companies are negligent or the tech's not there. We're not seeing it yet, but there's obvious indicators that that's the thing. Just like you said, it might be both. So we will see. As I always like to say, time will tell. But that is the stories for this week. Brian, I'll give you the final say before we head into the weekend.
Yeah, we always remind everybody that legal rideshare is available should you find yourself injured in a rideshare accident. We help rideshare drivers, passengers, victims, anybody who's injured. Please do not hesitate to contact us. The cases do not get better with time. We want to set a solid foundation for your case, talk to witnesses, gather evidence. All of our contact information is on our website, legalrideshare.com. And as I said, time is of the essence, and we're standing by ready to help.
Thank you, Brian. As I like to say, that is the end of this week in Rideshare. See you next week.